Hello, everyone. Um, Thanks for tuning in. Just a second. There's this one song I'm looking for. There we go. Okay, this is going to fit the line. The title came to me as Soul Born in Thought Before Matter. And so I like to see myself as a creature on this planet who's found a certain wisdom through concentration and in a sort of deep self inquiry of a certain point, has seen many different angles of that same point. So, what I mean is that I've kind of studied how existence is happening as me. And I've come to certain conclusions, some dictated by rational, um, you can say a rational gaze, and some dictated by an intuitive, experiential uh, uh, opening. So, what I mean by that is that there have been moments where my experience has not moved with rationality, it has moved with a faith of the unknown. And what I mean by that is that sometimes we can't always make a rational decision because we don't have all the full index of the information, right? So if when you're find yourself in a game where part of the forest is not even visible to you, you begin to walk very differently. For me, the world is first made of language. Before any sort of study or spiritual ideology, something that wasn't here and then was created to maintain our subjective meaning. So what I mean by this is that first you have to separate your direct experience from indirect language that your attention is constantly trying to run into that bunker. Sometimes a person believes because just like what they say, a vacuum pulls things towards itself. The space of existence provided will have an expression provided. That means they don't just make a football field for nothing. They make it for football players. And in some sense, if one was if one was inclined to choose a creative approach to the universe, that means you feel things were born from nothing, something came. You know, because our personalities are pretty much that, from nothing something happened, and something happened with such a unique orchestration of just history, significance, uh, the elegance of DNA. It's as if the designs of this world are very suited. It's not just like we have adjusted to the environment. It's also kind of like the environment was made for the creature that we are, you know. Now that takes us in 2 points where on some level I call this, it's we have ordered philosophy and chaotic philosophy. Chaotic philosophy is not afraid to acknowledge emptiness in an existential viewpoint or story. Okay, but the ordered universe must protect the child that is, it's like the illusion that is its child. Okay, think of it like in some movies you kind of see this dynamic where it's like the kid messes up and the father comes and pulls him out of the ruts of his, you know, out of the gutters of existence, and like, throws him into a new direction. Right now, this could, like in many different movies, this comes across in different ways, right? But pretty much there is a sort of transitioning of attention to an awareness where your attention realizes, holy shit, The whole moment is being aware of the body and any thoughts surrounding this body. I have this theory. It's a playful theory, but I kind of, strangely agree with it. It's this idea that I kind of noticed that I realized thoughts orbit. Do you know? That means like our thoughts are material in a way our material universe will never understand. A soul born in thought is a suggestion of your subjective existence coming into place before your objective existence. When I saw Buddhist teachings and doctrines, and when I was introduced to the concept of reincarnation and past lives, I was offended. I was offended. I was offended because my ego suddenly had to decide whether it wanted to give itself an infinitely imaginative freedom to see itself as anything, or if it chooses to stay back. Seldom do we realize that our intelligence is every moment decision making thing. And the decisions are occurring between a subjective and objective state. Okay? So in many philosophical circles, and in just many human beings around the world, once they've studied existence, especially in mystical traditions, my God, these people went to a point of making the conclusion that consciousness and matter coexist. Like the object you see in your eyes, they coexist. If there are no eyes to see, the object has no one to be existent to. Where it could suggest the idea of hidden existence, which in some sense means the unexplored. A soul born in thought before matter is a suggestion of a collective mind. This is something that spirituality actually does, and many spiritual traditions don't suggest it. They don't even, not that they don't suggest it, they don't even conceptualize it because they feel it's an ignorance. It's a viewpoint from ignorance. But I would explain it to you like this: that we have just like we can say the universe generated individually conscious beings, one can say it also generated collectively conscious beings. And these collective conscious beings it's either like, think of it this way, it's either one thing existing to many people in the same way, or it's many people being the same towards it. So one thing I feel they don't teach kids in school is that they don't give a position for their intelligence. It's kind of like a survival thing. Educational system is still ignoring the student, because you get a universal vision, a universal viewpoint of expression. It encompasses every individual aspect of you. That means the moment I realize, like, all my memories are being accessed as an expression of one moment. And when I say one moment, a moment that, regardless if I sleep or not, there is an existential value based on awareness. For me, I find ourselves to be the mind to be a multidimensional entity, the body to be a singular entity. And the pure being, the one who's looking through your eyes at its core, is too unspeakable and unknown. Because if it is not unknown, if truth is given a shape, the changing world will break that painting. Look at this wallpaper I've put. Look at how the water moves. It waves. And there's a sort of beauty of one pattern just existing forever, and there's a beauty of infinite patterns expressing nonstop. So last time I checked, the Earth is moving at a very fast speed around the sun. And we are in some sort of centrifugal universe. You know, like the guy, I could totally see where the guy who invented the centrifuge, where he got his inspiration from. So for me, we are creatures orbiting around our source. We are moths around the candle that is that sun that can, in some sense, its heat waves can expel. In astronomy, there's even suggestions that I believe it's either trillions of years or, you know, billions of, like it's this very long time where our galaxy will be intersecting another galaxy, as if a certain movement of positioning of different systems of life enjoy. For me, the thing is, as long as we just consider ourselves individual beings, we cannot know if the world is alive. That means our stories limit our search. Your beliefs limit your decisions. And so the biggest wisdom is given if you're a creature of belief, if you still want to believe things rather than realize you're just a moment of experience moving. You know, in some sense, I say the true self of people is attributeless. There is a kind of nature you see where it's like the magnificence of a waterfall and the magnificence of an eagle flying down, between the trees or something. You know, and there's that sort of majestic expression of the physical form of nature, but there is also a majestic presence of nature in the silence and stillness of being. And silence and stillness of being is where no meditation teacher couldn't say anything about. It's like, who can define silence? Based on what reference? Establishing its sophistication and knowledge in domains where it is working very hard subjectively and objectively. Subjectively, as a conscious being, there is an exploration of how the world is, in some sense, simulated and changed and received and expressed in your awareness. As an objective being, it's just how well you ride the waves of physical matter. And the best recommendation is a sort of healthy sobriety. Because I will tell you, life has too many games, and those people who suddenly make a mission out of life and eventually become people of extreme carelessness in civilization and society, let me tell you, the problem with going all the way, the problem of confronting this extreme, is that whenever something happens beyond the level of your comfort zone, a part of your personality breaks or shrinks. Unless it confronts the new. Do not be afraid of the new. So many people are afraid of the new. When I was young, I remember I had moments where I felt my whole life was valueless because the past had already defined me too well. I was like, what the hell? You know? Like my past, how can it's like when you look at, like, you know how people said, study history, so you don't repeat it? I'll tell you this. The purpose of the new is not to be the old. And if the old is constantly trying a world that adjusts to it, it's like we've got it all wrong. I feel there's this gap between the ethical behavior of young beings on this planet and older beings on this planet. I feel that what's going to happen is that the gap between the generations has always been. When a father and a son, when a son came to his father and said, "Father, I respect your world, but I am standing in another one." And so that's the value. That's the value of the true self. It is not. It can't be clothed in language. You hold a subjective positioning, and then you enter the world through a story, as if what people don't tell you is matter is in the simulation of the greatest tale ever said, the greatest story ever created. Without a story, we find our senses of individuality meaningless. And stories cannot exist with chaos and order. So as long as you're a creature that just wants to function based on stories, you will constantly experience the chaos and order that is there. As if in ancient Vedic books, there were tales of, there was this story of this yogi who, in some sense, like this yogi was meditating in this ultimate state of like peacefulness and samadhi until he reached the final moment of his life, like when he was about to leave the body consciously, right? Most people leave the body unconsciously, or they leave it only conscious of their subjective realm. They, you know, those people who never die have always been timeless watchers of the moment. Do you see? Eternity is not a concept that could be personalized. It is like when the concept of the person breaks, what is left? And in all traditions, it has been concluded to a witness. So every person who's looked at, like, okay, let me see who I am, they've noticed it's just been an awareness of awareness. And this awareness of awareness is so instantaneous, it's unspeakable. There was this very nice sentence in the Rig Veda where it was like, the mind is a slave to the real. This is in an ancient Indian sacred text, in some sense, in the Rig Vedas. So the concept that the mind is a slave to the real is an idea that is saying you have been judging the moment, coloring the moment in your stories that many of them only you can see. If somebody comes and asks you, what do you believe about, like what do you believe about nature or something, you're going to see. It's some of them, some questions can reveal, because they have never been asked, like because your sense of personality has never had an attention to that view. In doing so, it breaks and adjusts. In some sense, our rationality, our logic, our analysis is kind of like a vehicle race of in one thought, in some sense, explaining how all else moves. So what happens when you, as a moment, come into this conclusion that you're not your body, you're the observer of the body? Then you suddenly realize you're not your thoughts, you're the observer of thoughts. You're, in some sense, the creator of individualized meaning. As if we have very proudly accepted language as our world and never questioned it to be creatures of two dimensions at once. The evolution beyond language will mean either a new language being more all-inclusive of higher dimensions and higher freedoms. Either it's going to go that way, or it's going to be one of those things where either you get enlightened through the emptiness of life, or you get enlightened by the fullness of life. When you get enlightened by the emptiness of life, you have no creation. The dynamic of creation and destruction become just momentary values. You realize you have always been left, with your direct experience. Your direct experience means the experiencer within is directly being the moment. You're a creature that is being your moment. And I'll tell you this in such a profound way, because I had a dream where I was conscious in that dream, in the sense that I could move left and right. I couldn't move too much, but I could move. I could move something. Free will was extended to me more in that dream, more than just like just automatically being moved by the dream as I usually when I would dream. So when I had that dream, and I moved in it, I suddenly noticed something, that the mind is awake when the body is asleep. When our physical body is asleep, our mind manages to still create a world of experience. So for me, I was like, holy shit, how much of the day that I'm seeing is my mind making? Am I in some sense uh, stuck in a void simulation of nature? Some people have said society is a mass hallucination. But I'm saying, like, for me, these questions struck deep. And they struck so deeply that when you realize you cannot answer something, you suddenly find uh, an endurance you did not know before. For me, my skills have had an interconnectivity with how I saw that the ability of the world present in that moment. There have been days where, like, I would walk as if I would acknowledge that, there is, like the gods, like, just I would walk on the street and I would imagine how living in ancient Greece was, where you'd walk and you'd look at the clouds and you'd be like the gods are walking up there. You know what I mean? So for me, it was my mind has animated itself endlessly, day after day after day, into what I want, or what I want to be, or whatever the future it wants to serve itself. You suddenly find the value of art, and you see the value of artists sharing their work, sharing true expressions. That's what society needs. You know, society needs the fearless and the honest. Once you see duality is an empty infinity, you stop having this comparative dualistic mind, which in some sense frees you from the tasks of the temporary. When you are freed from the tasks of the temporary internally, externally, like, you gotta survive still, you know. But internally, where when your mind can stand in a way where it needs nothing else to be itself, then you have in some sense found the Tao of the moment. You have found the soul of the moment prior to your ideas being the world. My whole sense of intelligence, I mean, that's pretty extreme. But my sense of how I find my intelligence happens throughout the day was, before, it had to be something where I had to baby step my future. Like, I had to make it step by step. But when I realized, when you stop fearing the unknown, you actually suddenly have a more calmer way to access your own knowledge. And your knowledge is like the light of a lantern that has not gone out because your ancestors did a good job. And so creativity is the command of the modern generations. Do not be a child that just uh, opened its eyes in this life and just went on a few roller coaster rides and that was it. Be that child that opened its eyes to a world that needed it. Because this is the whole thing. This is the major inspiration of why we should all exist. And the reason is in philosophy, there's this thing where this teacher once asked a question from his classroom, where the question was WHY question mark, and all the kids gave their answers, and the teacher came back and said only one of you got it. And the teacher asked that one kid to stand up and say his answer, and that kid said the question was why, and that kid's answer was why not. And this means that when one condition hits our psychology, our awareness, how our attention has in some sense kept ideology has wielded ideology like a sword and shield. You know, Christ has been ascribed to say the kingdom of heaven is within you. And I was like, when I heard that, it was relatively deep. But at the same time, I was like, this man has understood the value of the inner, the value of all the rooms we're standing in this moment, which we are not aware of. There comes an honor with the exploration of a world beyond this one. And the world's beyond is external. So externally, we're doing that. I feel externally like Elon Musk is doing a good job trying to get us to Mars. My sentence to Elon Musk, like if I ever see him, I just look at him and say, "Go further, Elon, you Musk." and but the whole notion is that external exploration has been conducted. Now the species requires to have an internal exploration, and the internal exploration is the alignment of language being the world of the individual. And once you transcend the language threshold, once you move beyond the limits, that means your awareness, which is being your direct experience, finds itself being even more perfect than even before, or having the concept of perfection arise. So for me, the secrets of mastery were in nature's eyes, which means the master began to not be separate from its world, not to be a resistance against its world. But imagine it's as if the being was born and the world was like, now I will show you where you need to be. As if the awareness of uh, the decency of the creature aligns him to his karmic end. Those who care for living phenomena, you will have already been in paradise before needing to enter it. And those who look at existence and they're like, I don't like this show, I want to change the channel. I could tell you, if you ever wanted to be a character in a TV show, that's what existence in some sense is. But it's kind of like we're all stumbling around in our illusions, but somehow in the middle of this, placing the path of order, creating a way where the good ends, the good ideas of the civilization can combat the bad ideas of it. And if after billions of years it took us to evolve to be these sophisticated Homo sapiens, guess what? This science project must be continued. Not only man's mind has to return to nature, but in some sense it has to rebel against the unnatural effects of technology. There's going to come moments where people's dependence on technological presence is going to be more than natural presence, as if people want to live in their own worlds before another world. I had this theory that I think many kids, and in some sense, their consciousness is not oriented in their body at first, and it's only in their physical expression and engagement where the sky becomes the earth, where the attention from many dimensions focuses on one cause, as if uh, the the defeat of one dimension is the victory of another. The right and wrong of one wave of the world. It's as if like the ocean always listens to the songs of the moon. The waves rise and fall. Civilizations rise and fall in a sort of waving waving attempt of nature to constantly extend civilizations that keep going extinct. For me, uh, our minds are the gift of another dimension. As if when you look at an animal, it's like, okay, this animal has no way of like comprehending, like that squirrel on the tree has no way of comprehending, like, you know, mechanical engineering. We are given an opportunity. This opportunity presents itself in two ways, which is kind of like you have two eyes that see the same. You have a subjective self and objective self being one moment. And believe it or not, you're beyond both of those. You're beyond not only the stories of the world, but the emotions that many of those stories uh, trap souls in for years. What I mean by that is that, like, a story can occupy you from an eternal gaze, from a way of looking at life where it's as if from the impossibility you're wondering about the possibilities, as if you are the impossible attempt of nature to bring about a sophisticated opportunity. And so that's what bothers me in some sense when I see the civilization, uh, most of people's life being wasted to things that its value is only for them. Swami Vivekananda says, "Those who truly live, those who live for others, truly live." As if unless your intelligence has not been able to acknowledge something more than just your materialistic existence, as if you want a part of you timelessly wants the humanity to prosper, and a part of you at the same time acknowledges the inevitable. As if I believe it or not, I think our bodies are finite, our minds are infinite. We are we are above and beyond ourselves, but also below and behind. For matter, the more you align with nature, the less you have a sort of idea of self, rather, you're being a natural moment of self awareness. You'll see something beautiful, your flexibility of sense of self adjusts. You kind of realize why the chameleon in nature is a very conscious creature, because it knows when to change. And it knows when to accept a new look, a new way of looking at the world. Henry David Thoreau tells us it's not what you're looking at that matters, it's what you see. Heaven and hell are two sides of an endlessly spinning coin in the middle of empty space, like in the middle of outer space. Our ideas are spinning in the middle of nowhere, believe it or not, just like us. And we have made nowhere now here filled with many stories, colored with many stories. This kind of comprehension of language, like you don't have to completely acknowledge a sort of empty chaos to existence. I'm not trying to. Nihilism could be a trap too, as much as a spiritual story of an endless heaven can be, because they are not acknowledging nature; they're acknowledging snapshots of nature. You are too dynamic. Living this life is like riding the horse, not reading Wikipedia articles on horse riding. Like it doesn't help you. And so our knowledge has been oriented, honestly, based on a subjective realism. But many of our sub thoughts that if they were to manifest, we would be in shock. That means I'm kind of happy not all the thoughts of people manifest. Only thoughts that they put their attention and body and find the correct way to bring about work. I remember Sadhguru saying, like, it's not about like you doing just what feels good. If you want a certain result, you got to do the correct thing, and that depends. I believe people have preferences. Some people want their life to be filled with knowledge. And when I say knowledge, I mean like they just want to know everything about every moment they're existing in. And there's some people who it took me a while to get here. But in 2014, the major difference in me was that I stopped resisting the unknown and the inevitable. I stopped letting the inevitable paralyze me. It actually gave me a momentum. Anyways, thanks for tuning in, guys. Do not forget, as much as there's been an objective evolution, there's been a subjective evolution. The subjective evolution was remembered, I would say, or re-accessed um, through the self-awareness of this evolving creature. That means, like a chunk, like if you look at biological evolution, the way you'd probably contemplate what I'm saying is like this creature extended, stood up, and saw a reflection of itself and noticed an individualness, or through many other manners, but eventually strengthened through its being able to see itself separate from the world. It created a mind separate from the world. And the mind, in some sense, is never a tangible shaped thing. That means I laugh at my ego as much as I laugh at the ego of others. There have been moments where I have judged people, like, and this was like when I was younger, my rage, like, I was still naive. I still felt I could, like, what I saw was it only. When you get out of that stage, you begin appreciating the eyes of the species, how each one of us, in some sense, is a flashlight of the darkness of manifestation, lighting up what, in some sense, will be seen. In terra incognita, a new light breaks on uncharted territories. A soul born in thought before matter realizes it is a soul before matter and thought. Realizes it is a value, energetic awareness or intention of energy to be in this mode. We are the masters of our inner universe, but servants of our outer. You'll see, the more you start serving your species, serving the moment, serving the world, you're going to see your karma change. But if you still stick in your, like, those people who are violent, they're like blind savages. They're blind savages because they only justify their behavior on only what they see. That means, imagine like uh, somebody thinking, like, having no idea of gravity. That person is functioning in a world where that concept doesn't exist. And then when the concept of gravity is shared, that person suddenly has a way to look at something happening in life and subjectively express it. I guess I will share with you a Tagore quote, Rabindranath Tagore. Just a second, guys. Let me just find this. God. Okay. Um, and I'm just going to share his quotes. He says, "Death is not extinguishing the light. It is only putting out the lamp because the dawn has come." Faith is the bird that feels the light when the dawn is still dark. And I guess one of his most important quotes, I remember sharing this years ago on the talk. He says, "I slept and dreamt that life was joy. I awoke and saw that life was service. I acted and behold, service was joy." These words from Rabindranath Tagore, they are suggestions of abidance by your true nature. Don't forget, you are here to look through your eyes and to also explore through your eyes. And nobody in this world has your view. This is why it's worth sharing. Because there could be something in how you look at the world, dear listener, that maybe the world needs to hear. Anyways, I hope this talk has served you. Much blessings and namaste.